Cary Stayner is a name etched in infamy, a man whose crimes shocked the world and exposed the darkest recesses of jealousy, obsession, and psychopathy. Known as the Yosemite Killer, Stayner murdered 4 women in the 1990s, leaving law enforcement and communities struggling to comprehend his motives. At the heart of his violence was a twisted fixation on his own family, a deep-seated jealousy of his younger brother, and a compulsion that led him to commit acts of unimaginable horror. His story is not just about murder, it is about the destructive power of envy, psychological instability, and the ease with which darkness can hide behind a seemingly ordinary exterior. Cary Stayner was born in 1961 in Merced, California, and grew up in a family that appeared normal on the surface but harbored deep undercurrents of dysfunction. His father was a strict disciplinarian, enforcing rules with a harshness that left emotional scars. His younger brother, Stephen, was considered the golden child, athletic, charming, and successful in ways that Cary struggled to emulate. From an early age, Cary experienced feelings of inadequacy, resentment, and rivalry. Psychologists often cite these formative experiences as crucial in understanding his later violent behavior. Despite his inner turmoil, Cary managed to maintain a facade of normalcy. He worked various jobs, earned certifications as a handyman, and engaged with neighbors and colleagues without arousing suspicion. To outsiders, he seemed quiet, perhaps shy, but harmless. Those who knew him casually could not have imagined the depth of his envy, the intensity of his resentment toward his brother, or the dark urges that simmered beneath the surface. It is often this contrast between public appearance and private obsession that makes serial killers like Cary Stayner so terrifying. Stayner's criminal trajectory escalated in the early 1990s, culminating in a series of brutal murders that would earn him a place among America's most notorious serial killers. The killings took place near Yosemite National Park, a region that drew tourists and vacationers, providing Stayner with both opportunity and concealment. His first known victim was Carol Sund, a woman whose disappearance immediately triggered local concern. Investigators initially suspected a kidnapping or accidental death, but the evidence would later reveal a far more sinister reality. The modus operandi of Cary Stayner was both calculated and opportunistic. He targeted women who were alone, often tourists unfamiliar with the area, and used charm, manipulation, and coercion to gain their trust. Once his victims were isolated, he exerted physical control, ultimately murdering them in ways that reflected both rage and sadistic pleasure. What makes Stayner unique among serial killers is the psychological component of his motives. Unlike killers driven solely by sexual gratification or financial gain, Stayner was profoundly influenced by his envy of his brother and his perception of being overshadowed and undervalued. Investigators soon uncovered patterns in Stayner's crimes. Each murder was preceded by stalking, observation, and psychological manipulation. He appeared to derive satisfaction from the control he exerted over his victims, reflecting a need to assert dominance that extended from his personal insecurities. The intersection of jealousy, obsession, and opportunity created a dangerous combination, one that would have lethal consequences for anyone who crossed paths with him. Cary Stayner's relationship with his brother Stephen was central to understanding his motives. Psychological evaluations revealed that Cary harbored intense envy of his brother's achievements, personality, and relationships. This envy transformed into a broader resentment toward women, particularly those who reminded him of his own inadequacies or who represented success, independence, or beauty he felt he lacked. In many ways, the murders were symbolic expressions of his rage, a distorted attempt to assert control and compensate for perceived failures and humiliations in his personal life. The investigation into Stayner's crimes was complex and meticulous. Authorities relied on a combination of eyewitness accounts, forensic evidence, and behavioral profiling to track his movements and connect him to multiple murders. The discovery of his victims' remains provided critical clues, revealing both the brutality of the attacks and the psychological patterns underlying his actions. Each new piece of evidence exposed the chilling reality of Stayner's capacity for violence and the depth of his fixation on his own grievances. Stayner's manipulation and cunning extended beyond his crimes to his interactions with law enforcement. He initially denied involvement, presenting himself as cooperative and harmless. However, detectives noted inconsistencies in his statements, behavioral anomalies, and patterns of deceit. Over time, forensic analysis, DNA evidence, and witness testimony closed the gap between suspicion and proof, ultimately leading to his arrest and indictment. The contrast between his outward appearance and his inner depravity underscores a recurring theme in the study of serial killers: the ability to mask evil behind ordinary facades. The trial of Cary Stayner revealed the full extent of his crimes and motives. Prosecutors emphasized the connection between his envy, obsession with his brother, and the deliberate targeting of women. Testimony from surviving victims, forensic experts, and psychologists provided insight into both the physical and psychological dimensions of the murders. The courtroom proceedings illuminated not only the violence of his actions, but the complex interplay of jealousy, psychopathy, and personal inadequacy that drove him to commit multiple murders. Public reaction to the case was intense and often incredulous. Media outlets highlighted both the brutality of the crimes and the psychological analysis of Stayner's motives, emphasizing the unusual role that familial envy played in his actions. Families of the victims, though devastated, expressed relief at the eventual capture and conviction of Stayner, yet the psychological scars left by his violence persisted. For many, the case challenged assumptions about the origins of criminal behavior, particularly in individuals who appear ordinary or unremarkable on the surface. Psychologists studying Cary Stayner often focus on the interplay between childhood experiences, personality disorders, and adult behavior. Stayner exhibited traits associated with narcissism, lack of empathy, and obsessive tendencies, all compounded by early feelings of inadequacy and rivalry with his brother. These factors created a psychological profile that explains, though never justifies, his escalation from resentment to murder. Understanding these dynamics is essential for criminal profiling, risk assessment, and preventative strategies in cases involving potential serial offenders. The murders committed by Cary Stayner were not random acts of violence. They were expressions of internal conflict, obsession, and the need to exert control. His choice of victims, methods of manipulation, and execution of crimes reveal a calculated mind operating under the influence of deep-seated envy and resentment. Each act of violence was both an assertion of power and a reflection of his distorted worldview, where personal inadequacy and jealousy translated into lethal action against innocent individuals. The investigation also revealed the importance of forensic science and meticulous police work. Advances in DNA analysis, crime scene reconstruction, and behavioral profiling were crucial in connecting Stayner to his victims and establishing his motives. Detectives pieced together a narrative that explained not only the physical evidence but the psychological underpinnings of the murders. Each breakthrough reinforced the intersection of human behavior, criminal opportunity, and investigative diligence in solving complex cases of serial murder. Cary Stayner's story ultimately ends with conviction and life imprisonment. The legal process exposed his motives, actions, and psychological profile in detail, providing closure for families and communities affected by his crimes. Yet the case continues to fascinate criminologists, psychologists, and true crime enthusiasts due to the unusual interplay of jealousy, family dynamics, and psychopathy that drove his actions. His story remains a case study in understanding how personal obsessions can manifest as extreme criminal behavior. In reflecting on Cary Stayner, one must consider both the human and psychological dimensions of his crimes. The victims, whose lives were stolen, remind us of the devastating human cost of unchecked obsession and psychopathy. The meticulous planning, manipulation, and execution of his murders reveal the terrifying efficiency of a mind consumed by envy and rage. For law enforcement and society, Stayner's case underscores the importance of vigilance, early recognition of warning signs, and understanding the psychological drivers that can lead ordinary individuals to commit extraordinary acts of violence. The Yosemite Killer case, his envy of his brother, and his psychopathic tendencies collectively provide a window into the mind of a dangerous and calculating offender. From his troubled upbringing to his manipulation of victims and methodical approach to murder, Cary Stayner embodies the intersection of personal grievance, obsession, and extreme criminality. His story remains one of the most compelling and disturbing examples of modern serial murder, a chilling reminder that darkness can lurk behind familiar faces and ordinary lives.